Hello, everybody. I am Art Prof TA, Deepti Menon, and I am joined here with the wonderful Art Prof TA, Eloise. Today, we have a very interesting discussion happening. It's on You Are Your Toughest Art Critic. If you are looking to strengthen and flex your art muscle, Art Prof is the community for you. Yeah, we got tutorials, critiques, professional development, art dares, and it's all for free. Imagine that. So, Eloise, I'm going to ask you, true or false, do you feel like you are your toughest art critic? And if the answer to that is yes, which I am willing to put some money on that maybe it is, because we're both doing the stream.
What gave you that idea?
Where do you think that stems from? Can you remember back to when that started? Has that always been true?
Yeah, I would say it has always been true, and from a very young age. And I don't know if that's because of how I am naturally, or where I grew up, or what my family is like, anything like that. But all I know is that here we are in the year of our Lord 2020, and I am my toughest art critic. What about you?
I would have to agree with you. I think that it's funny because I feel like I've always been my toughest art critic from an early age, but I do feel like after I went to college for art and I was suddenly not the best artist in my school, or the one that was constantly going to after school classes and constantly making really impressive portfolio pieces that everyone was like, wow, Deepti. And I was suddenly around all these people who were making boats and bridges. And I was like, whoa, what? That's when my criticism, my self-criticism really skyrocketed. Because suddenly I wasn't just comparing myself to myself and knowing my own where I could progress, but I was suddenly seeing what other people were doing, which I felt was really detrimental. And one thing I'd be curious to hear from you is, why do you think that we are our own toughest critics? Where do you think that comes from? Maybe just for you or in general?
I mean, I think that it comes from having incredibly high standards and having a incredibly, and having, I think it was Neil Gaiman who said you also have really good taste, and so you can identify whether your taste is not up to scratch. Viewers, if that's not actually a Neil Gaiman thing, please tell me who it is. Yeah, and I think that, I mean, there's also a part of me that's always gonna go off and blame society or whatever, but I do think also that there is a tendency in the art world in particular to commodify product and commodify success. And so we kind of come into it with this idea that we have to make work that's good enough to fit that.
Absolutely. I think that that's a really good point, because a lot of times that negates the benefits of just playing around and experimenting, because everything then has to be good because of this emphasis on commodity.
So Neil has a comment saying, I don't think I'm my worst art critic because my self-critique doesn't make sense at all. I'm just happen to not like most of what I make, which isn't a helpful critique. I mean, relatable.
Absolutely relatable. And it's interesting because I'd be curious, Neil, to see, do you feel like you don't like most of what you make, but other people are perceptive to it? Because a lot of times I feel like one of the main reasons I'm so self-critical is because so much of my art, I feel like, even though it isn't, is a reflection of myself. As a visual artist, Eloise, don't you feel like the process of creating art and the process of putting up your art for other people to see is so personal, more so than, being a professional accountant or something like that?
100%. I mean, I feel like it is putting part of my soul out into the world for people to observe and judge and pass judgment on. I mean, I think Neil, a good suggestion. Sorry, I'm going to pull that comment back up. I think a good suggestion for you is just that, like, if you are looking for positive critique, maybe what it is you need to do is just shore up your community, right? Like, find a trusted group of people who you can turn to for criticism. I mean, Deepti, was there a moment recently where that was something that you wanted?
Absolutely. I mean, especially during this pandemic that we're living in, I find that making art is so much more isolating. And I was recently working on a music video that, now that I've had some time to distance myself from, I feel very proud of. But in the moment, I was working by myself, and just logistically, copyright reasons, I wasn't sharing the music with people because of the band and all that. So it was a very isolated experience. And I felt like in that experience, I was really like going back and forth from being like, this is amazing, I'm doing such a good job. And then going to the point of being like, this is the worst thing I've ever made. How dare I ask people to pay me for something like this? And suddenly I found myself like floating. And I find that having a artistic community of people whose opinions you value and whose work you look up to is so important, because those are the people that are going to ground you and be like, hello, Mr. or Mrs. or whatever, please come back down to earth. And, here is some actual criticism from someone who cares about your progress. What do you think, Eloise?
Well, I think that this comment from David Pena basically sums up what I was going to say, which is when you, a queen, come across another queen and start discussing how to best maximize your joint slay,
My crown.
Exactly what you need when you are being your worst critic. You need to acquire your best critic, and your best critic is probably someone external to you.
Definitely. And I also feel like it's great for me to show my work to people who aren't artists too. You know what I mean? Like, a lot of times at least my work, the kind of work that I make, is consumed primarily by people who are not artists or are not doing that stuff, because I work in music videos, I'm an actor, like all the stuff that is consumed by the masses of people. So I like showing that stuff to people who aren't, practicing the same media, because they have really valuable insight. And suddenly it kind of just slaps me out of this like self-loathing moment that I'm in. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay. Working on that flow. I mean, I just wanted to also say that, like, this is something that's also a problem when you're working alone, because it's just you and the voices in your head torturing yourself. I really valued when I got my current job where I actually had a team that I could turn to and be like, hey, what do you think of this? And kind of actually have like something built in, like a built-in support structure.
Yeah, that's really interesting, talking about the built-in support and the group, because I'm curious for you, Eloise, how do you draw the line between, and maybe you're just not this kind of person, but do you find yourself sometimes, rather than seeing that group as a beneficial thing, do you find yourselves ever comparing yourselves to the other artists in a negative way, and then that turns into self-criticism?
Oh yeah, I mean, any method for like tearing myself down or making myself feel terrible, I will come up with.
Yeah.
I will always come up with a way to torture myself, and that is the hill that I have apparently chosen to die on. That said, that's just something that you need to get past, because in reality, your community is always going to be your strongest support system. You can't carry everything by yourself.
This comment I saw is, I thought was really interesting. Eloise, I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. How do you get over the fear of revealing your art to others if it feels so personal?
So something as like simple as thinking like, and this is sort of going back to what I was talking about with like the commodifying of artwork and the commodifying of personal experience and making it really obsessed with like being a product. You've got to like put it outside of yourself and kind of almost make it an object that is not tied to your soul, so that you can accept criticism. And that's just practice. And I think that a good like tactic for that is, rather than obsessing over making one good product, like one good piece, instead allow yourself a time period where you just create as much as possible, as rapidly as possible, without worrying too much about it being good or not, and iterating. So getting it out there and then moving on to the next thing without dwelling on it. And that'll kind of desensitize you.
Yeah, and it is so hard, like Valerie says, because it does feel so personal and it does feel like a part of your soul that's being put up there. But honestly, the more you do it, in my experience, the easier it gets. Like, that's just the quickest way. But I do agree, Eloise, with what you said about just churning things out and like really distancing yourself from the need for things to be good or to have value or to impress other people or to even impress yourself, and just realize the benefit and the value in the fact that you are just creating. And like, most often when I've shown my work in critique, I found that other people are learning from my mistakes and from the criticism that I'm getting just as much as I am. So realizing it's less about you, like only you, and it's kind of like something that a bunch of people can benefit from, was something that I, had a moment of being like, oh yeah, this isn't just all about me, and not everyone's staring at me. They're also doing some self-reflecting while looking at my work.
I thought this comment from Moises was a really good one. The part of my art practice is also filmmaking and a more installation approach. My team of actors and associates means the world to me, and their opinions are so valuable. And I think that really plays into what you were just saying, because like this idea that like everyone is looking at themselves and at like their own accomplishments or their own potential flaws, particularly in a medium like film, which is so fundamentally collaborative. I feel like there's also a lot of potential for growth there for people who tend to take on too much individual responsibility and too much individual criticism or harshness, because you're kind of forced to distribute the load between multiple people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And I think
you have that experience as an animator, or
definitely. I mean, animation is such a isolated task on occasion, but it also can be super collaborative depending on the size of the project you're working on. But I've always found that community has been the most important thing for me, because if like the hive mind in a positive way, I think can be so beneficial, because you do get exhausted as one person. I mean, I'm used to directing things, which in a lot of, times that's the person who's looking at all the moving parts. But I think that realizing that in a collaborative sense, everyone's voice is important, even the like person at the bottom of the totem pole, as awful as that even hierarchy thing is, but they might see something that everyone else has missed. So realizing that opening up to other people, asking people for their opinions can actually not even just be the right thing to do, but could actually really save your butt. I've learned through like just being a filmmaker.
Following up on that, so Sean says, community can be extremely nebulous, especially in places as overwhelming as New York City. There's a huge discrepancy of audiences in terms of race, class, etc., and it can get really insular sometimes. Do you have any tips for people who are looking to find that community of people they can trust?
Yeah, I mean, Sean, this is so real and a really good point. I'm really happy you brought this up, because it's so true. Just telling people to find community is very ignorant, and I think it's good that you point out that it's hard to do, and it can a lot of times be toxic if you are a person of color, or whatever you identify with that maybe the other people in the room don't. I have found personally, especially living in New York, I found that social media has been great for me to find people. I mean, Art Prof is wonderful, and we do have a really diverse and global community, and it doesn't hit every community, or I don't know if everyone can identify with our community, but there's definitely a lot. But I also found that finding artists I like on Instagram, for example, and reaching out to them has been wonderful for me. And a lot of them, I'm lucky I live in New York, a lot of them live here. I've been able to join communities through that way. So it's difficult, and it does require some effort, but looking at like hyper specific communities, like I look for a lot of women of color communities, Indian communities, and I love those communities, because a lot of times I waste so much time explaining myself, and then I walk into these communities and they just understand, and it's a nice different perspective to have, you know what I mean?
Right. And I also think, and going off of it, I mean, obviously I'm not a woman of color, or, but I think that I did have a conversation with someone recently about this idea of the value sometimes of like making work for specific communities and like with that audience in mind, rather than like the voice in your head can like frequently be a voice that is like created by a culture that does not value work that you're making that specifically addresses those like specific like cultures or communities that you're trying to speak to, and just kind of needing to like recognize that and just be like, okay, and that is indoctrination by white supremacy, and I'm going to put that to the side and like see that for what it is and continue to honor and make work that is like I know is valuable and that people tell me is valuable.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm curious, just in the world of self-criticism, do you find that there are things that just have nothing to do with art making that helps you take a step back maybe and reassess? Do you find that to be important when it's, you know, your visual art that you're making?
100%. And I think that's actually something, though, that has been really frustrating to me right now during this time of pandemic, when we're really limited in what we can allow ourselves to do that's not like necessity out in the world. Because something that has always fed me and also helped me gain perspective is doing things like going out and seeing friends, going to events that have nothing to do with my practice, going hiking, going out and like getting some external perspective. And that's something that is really difficult to do. Like right now, I kind of feel like I'm in tunnel mode, and that's frustrating. What about you?
I feel that way, absolutely. Doing things that just have nothing to do with visual art can feel so good and be such a reminder of like the world. I agree. Like, you know, going and seeing friends and just talking about current events or talking about how their families are doing, or taking a trip to nature, getting out of the city, all of those things just kind of, sometimes you need your brain to just like be rattled and like be like, hello, like wake up. And I think that's been really valuable to me. But also I had a really interesting conversation with a friend recently who I went to school with. And we both were animators in school, and we both are animators now. And we both had this moment of being like, I hate being an animator. And I was like, where has that come from? You know, like, I don't actually believe that, but where has that come from? And I think it's just because we haven't animated for fun in a really long time, which is something that we used to do in school. We used to collaborate. We used to make silly things and not care about the product, which then kind of negates the self-criticism, because you make it and you're like, oh my God, look at this crazy thing, never gonna look at it again. But we were looking at some of the old stuff that we made and we're just like, oh my God, this was so fun, and there's actually some value to this. And I was just thinking about like, taking a step back doesn't necessarily have to mean like go to the beach and don't look at your phone and, you know, just put your toes in the sand and feel that feel. It can mean like FaceTime your friends and make like portraits of each other over FaceTime, and then just mail it to each other and never think about it again. Like, do you find yourself, Eloise, ever doing artwork for fun anymore?
Yeah, sort of. The problem is that doing artwork for fun is like also sort of part of my work. Like, even if I'm doing work for myself, it's still part of my career. So it's not just like the work that I do for money for other people. It's also like, it's like there's this sort of like self-betterment aspect to it, right? Like,
yeah. And is there a way to just get rid of that at all?
If you have a way to get rid of that, I would love to hear.
I'll think about it. Tell us in the comments, folks, if there's anything.
Monetize it. Oh, Sean says that he hasn't made a painting in years.
That's so real, though. The time flies by, and especially like, don't you feel like, Eloise, when you're out of school, especially like right out of school, the goal is to like make money and like pay off your debt and like get into the workforce. And the next thing you know, it's been like 10 years and you haven't made anything for yourself. And you don't even want to sometimes, because I'll raise the point that self-criticism can go past just your visual art, but like just your productivity and comparing your career to other people. Like, do you feel that way at all when you see just where you are in your life? Doesn't that kind of turn into self-criticism too?
Oh, I mean, 100%. And again, like, being your worst critic is something that applies to life as well as artwork. I mean, it's like, if there's a mountain and you climb it and you get to the top and you're like, oh yeah, I've been so excited to get to the top of this mountain, and then there's like another mountain at the top of that next mountain that you're like, well, gosh, I gotta get to the top of that mountain, otherwise I'm not good enough.
And then you notice that like 3 of your friends have climbed both mountains twice, and you're like, oh, also everyone, my cat has made an appearance.
Hello!
Sorry, this is Mirchi, everybody. I was gonna try and shoo him away, but I was like, the amount of distraction he will cause if I shoo him away will be more than him jumping on my table.
So Gina says, I've never made art for money, so I've been able to keep going for 25 years. I feel like that's definitely a valuable perspective, just because, like, I know at Art Prof, like, we're all people who are sort of, like, in industry, whether that's, like, the commercial art world or the illustration world. Deepti, we are going to get so many more views and likes on this video.
Can this be the thumbnail? Hello! Sorry, guys.
I think that, like, we, like, here at Art Prof all tend to be, you know, people who are trying to work in the industry in some way, or, like, make money off of our work, or are doing work in one industry but trying to do personal career stuff in another.
Yeah.
And it's really important for us as TAs to, like, remember that, like, so many people in this community are folks who just simply do it for the very passion.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I also, like, but not to negate the fact that the self-criticism can exist absolutely as intensely in both communities. Just being an artist kind of lends yourself to that. And I wonder, I was actually thinking, I was like, I wonder if it has something to do with like the way we were all raised and stuff. But I feel like everyone comes from such different backgrounds and from such different environments and schoolings and this and that. But like at the end of the day, artists are always so hard on themselves. Although in the comments, it seems like a lot of people say that they are quite kind to themselves, which I'm trying to be better at. And I don't know about you, Eloise, but I do feel like over the years, I've gotten to be better at being kind to myself. Have you?
With lots and lots of work. And sometimes it has been almost in response to like what Moises is saying, like, which can be most fulfilling but also damaging: public casual criticism or academic and gallery critics. So before answering this, I will say that sometimes I've actually become more kind to myself out of self-defense. Because there are definitely people out there, or even just like unintentionally, people who will tear you down. And whether that's like on purpose or just like through callousness and not realizing it, I think that sometimes you get to that point where you're like, you know what? No, I'm not gonna wallow in my self-hatred and guilt today. You know, not today. I'm going to try and be positive. But the comment from Moises, a question to you, Deepti, is like, which can be the most fulfilling but also damaging: public casual criticism or academic gallery critic types? Like a professor.
Honestly, I feel like they all, like it. I always feel like in general, academic criticism can oftentimes, I found, be the most fulfilling to me, because there is a moderator, generally like the teacher, who hopefully has the best interest and can kind of guide the criticism. But I've definitely asked like casual friends or public for feedback and gotten some really like awful, snarky criticism that just isn't valuable, because these people don't really understand what it means to give critique, you know, and it can just be really hurtful things that they're saying that's not actually, you know, like, I don't get it. Or phrases where it's like, well, you're not really providing me with anything that will better me. Do you know what I mean? So I think it's hard for me to say which is the most fulfilling and which is the most damaging. All I can say is that be smart about who you ask for criticism. You know, communities like Art Prof are definitely also curated, because we have TAs and we have Clara and we have staff who are there to give you criticism, and the community. But if it's not going well with the community, we can kind of guide it and be like, hey, this might be more helpful. What do you think, Eloise? Do you have thoughts on this?
My thought is that whichever one of these options upsets you or gets to you the most probably indicates to you more about whom you value or whose like perspective you care the most about.
Mm-hmm.
And so if anything, it's like a helpful pointer if this does happen, like if there is like a curator who says something that like really gets to you, that's actually an indication for you to look at yourself and be like, why is it that this specific kind of person is able to get under my skin so much? Like maybe you're totally fine with like random people, like members of the public, but like there's this one professor that just like you can't get over. By the way, I just want to give a shout out to Tom G for the super chat. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
We also think this is a great topic.
Yeah, and thank you, Tom. It's with donations like yours and support like yours that our Prof exists and we can do these live streams. So you rock, Tom. Thank you so much. This is an interesting comment from John Murph. Would you say you're trying to make a masterpiece? Because that's where the criticism starts and can start the anxiety. I don't know who they're directing this comment to, but it's true. It kind of goes back to what we were saying earlier, Eloise, about the value and the commodification of work. You know what I mean? Like a lot of times we are trying to create masterpieces, even though we don't realize it. And that's why like art dares can be really fun, or like the 2,500 challenge that we have going on in our Discord, like just ways to bang things out and be like, I can't make a masterpiece. It's just not
feasible.
Happen.
It's like not feasible. And then you just let it go. Like you see your impulse, which is to make everything perfect every single time. And you're like, there's absolutely no realistic way for me to do this.
Mm-hmm. You know, one thing that has actually helped me with my self-criticism over the years is creating work and then forcing myself like under a specific deadline. Like I have 24 hours to make the self-portrait and then forcing myself not to look at it for a month. Like literally put it in a box, ship the box to California and tell it like return date, like mom and dad send it back to me in a week. Because don't you feel like when you take a step back like that, I feel this way with my music video. I watched that music video every single day for 8 weeks. Now it's been like 3 and I watched it back and I was like, wow, Deepti, I'm really proud of you. Whereas in those 8 weeks, I was like, how dare you call yourself an animator, Deepti?
You need fresh eyes, but this kind of goes off with like what we were talking about of like going and talking to some friends, like for fun, going to the beach, going hiking, going to like go out and dance, like do something that has nothing to do with your practice that will like give you a reset, fresh perspective, and then come back and look at it.
Yeah. Definitely. It's such a heavy topic, you know, because it does like, it has to do with our mental health. It has to do with our productivity. It has to do with like finding community. It's so heavy, but that's why I feel like having these conversations are so important, because it's something that so many people struggle with, but rarely do we have conversations like this where we're like, oh yeah, hello, this is a thing that we struggle with on top of everything else that artists have to deal with.
This comment from Erica Jung, I feel like people tend to critique without understanding the intention behind the piece. Happens on writing too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, and this is definitely a situation where generally I would assume that like you yourself, the artist, will not be the worst critiquer in this specific context because you are the one making the work. Sometimes people are just going to be terrible.
Yeah, no, it's true. And like, that's why I, like when I'm teaching, I like to give the artists a chance to speak about their intention, like not go into a ramble, which I do all the time. But like, you know, give us some background, because a lot of times, even on the Art Prof Discord, I see people post work for critique and they just say, hey, this is an oil painting I recently did. I would love feedback. And I think for your own benefit, sometimes it's best to give a sentence or two about the intention or whatever, because otherwise people are just gonna give you and when you're looking for critique, you want to, you know, navigate that road in a way that's the most beneficial to you. So giving, you know, a little bit of backstory is great, but sometimes you're not in a position where you can do that. You've made a music video that's out in the world and Joe Schmo in, you know, wherever Russia is watching it and like giving their critical analysis, and you just have to be But that's also valuable. You know, you can look at it and be like, huh, that's really interesting that this random person who had no insight can look at it and come with this, you know, come out with this narrative. What can I take, you know, from that and put into the future?
Moises, thank you so much for your super chat donation. Means so much to us. And your comments today have been on fire. So thank you for that. We really appreciate it. Sorry. Erica has a follow-up question for you, Deepti, which I have on the screen. On the topic of art that's for something crucial, Deepti, how did you work through the self-criticism and finish that video? Did you just follow your gut or analyze how you felt about it?
That's a really good question. I think a lot of it had to do with the fact that it was a client-based product and I just had a deadline and I had a client and I just had to get the thing done. But a lot of it just has to do with trusting my gut. Like, at the end of the day, I am very self-critical, but I've been at this for a while and I can't speak for everyone, but I think just trusting that, like, I do trust my gut. And even though in the moment I might be feeling bad about things, I do trust that I am putting in as much effort as I possibly can. And just knowing that, like, I'm doing the best.
Whoa. Deepti has disappeared. Okay, well, I'm assuming that what they were going to say was that they're following their gut and analyzing how they felt about it and just, like, needing to trust that at a certain point the client wouldn't necessarily steer them wrong. And then, like, also just, like, taking those moments of self-reflection and, like, putting it back into the work and, like, holding space for their own, like, criticism. Also, Deepti is texting me and telling me that her internet went out, and I am letting her know that we are still on. Everyone, give some, like, you know, snaps, jazz hands, send your prayers, wish on a star for Deepti's internet. So Antonio Salinas asked us, how have you seen artists balance their craft with another craft that goes together with it? I'm speaking from the perspective of someone who wants to pair illustration and writing. So what I would say is, oh, you're back! Yes!
I don't know what happened.
Hello, I kept it going.
You're amazing. Sorry, guys, technical difficulties. Blame it on the cat.
It's totally the cat.
Continue, sorry.
So just Antonio Salinas says, and this is probably our last comment for the evening, how have you seen artists balance their craft with another craft that goes together with it? I'm speaking from the perspective of someone who wants to pair illustration and writing. I think that, well, do you have any perspective on that?
Go for it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, like, in this, like, question of, like, pairing craft with other crafts, like, that's also a place where you kind of get, like, double the self-criticism. Like, because you're comparing, like, I feel like we've got this attitude of, like, jack of all trades, master of none. Like, if you're drawing on two traditions, then you're not necessarily going to do a good job at either, and you've got, like, double the number of, like, excellent examples from, like, both categories to compare yourself to. I think at that point you just need to, like, say, okay, and now I'm going to turn off my phone and stop looking at those people who make me feel super jealous, and I'm just going to make my work.
Yeah, I think it goes back to trusting your gut, which is what I was saying before my internet decided to betray me. But yeah, you know, trusting your gut, and like you said, Eloise, just feeling confident in what you, standing in your truth and knowing that sometimes the internet is just going to be mean to you, or outside people are just going to be mean to you, and knowing that you can do it all. You know what I mean? But thank you everyone for joining us today. I just wanted to note that if you're new here and not been following us, we have an Art Prof podcast, you guys, which is so exciting. Please, it's on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Please leave us a rating and a review. That would be awesome. Also, you can join us on our Discord in about 5 minutes. Both Eloise and I will be there in the post live streams channel talking to all of y'all. Come join us. It's where all the cool kids hang out. If you're not on our Discord, the invite link is in the video description below. Please like and subscribe our videos. This is super duper fun. Thank you for joining us today. And also a huge thank you to all of our Patreon supporters and all the super chats today. We truly would not be here without you guys. Our Prof survives because of you. So thank you, thank you, thank you. This was such a great discussion. I feel like I'm going to be kinder to myself after this conversation. But yeah, thank you for joining. This is Deepti and Eloise signing off. See you on the Discord, and thank you everyone so much. Bye.